They placed 7 boulders across my tractor path sometime after midnight on a Wednesday. Big ones, too. The kind you normally see decorating the entrance of expensive neighborhoods, sitting beside polished stone signs that say things like "Welcome Home." By sunrise Thursday morning, those same 7 boulders were sitting somewhere else, entirely lined up neatly across the front gate of the Ridgecrest Commons subdivision, blocking every single car inside from leaving. And at exactly 6:45 a.m., the HOA president called me, sounding like a man who had just discovered the worst possible way to start his day. My name is LeBron Mack. I'm 49 years old, a farmer in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, and before I tell you anything else about what happened, I want to make one thing clear. I am not a man who wakes up in the morning looking for trouble. Farming gives you enough problems already. Weather, markets, machinery breaking down at the worst possible moment, you don't go out hunting extra conflict. But if someone drops trouble right in the middle of your path, well, sometimes you move it. I've been working the same 83 acres of land for 19 years. Soybeans mostly, some corn rotation, and a small herd of cattle grazing the back pasture. My father worked this same land 22 years before me, and the farmhouse I live in now, the one with the wide porch facing the fields, he built it himself in 1978. There's something about land that changes the way you think about time. Crops move in seasons, fences last decades, and some paths get worn into the earth so naturally that they feel older than memory. One of those paths runs along the eastern edge of my property. That path matters because the back 40 acres of my farm sit in a low stretch of land that's hard to reach from the west side. Years ago, when a developer bought the neighboring parcel to build a subdivision, I sat down with him and suggested something simple, a recorded easement. 12 feet wide along the boundary, just enough room to move tractors and equipment between my front fields and the back acreage. He agreed. The survey was done, the easement recorded properly with Rutherford County, and that was that. Legally speaking, it was as solid as the foundation of my house. When Ridgecrest Commons was first built, nobody had a problem with it. People waved when I drove past on the tractor. Kids would watch from their backyards like tractors were still the coolest machines in the world. Sometimes someone grilling burgers would raise a beer toward me as I passed. It wasn't friendship exactly, more like quiet rural coexistence. Then Derek Solis became president of the HOA. Derek was the kind of man who always looked like he had somewhere else to be. Fast talker, sharp clothes, regional sales manager for a medical device company. The sort of person who believes every situation is a problem to be solved through persuasion. About 8 months before the Boulders showed up, I received a letter from the HOA. It was polite enough, professionally formatted, probably run through 3 drafts and a grammar check. According to the board, my tractor path created what they described as a visual and acoustic disruption to the residential experience of homeowners in the east-facing units. I remember sitting at the kitchen table reading that sentence twice. Visual and acoustic disruption. That's a fancy way of saying someone didn't like seeing a tractor drive by. The letter asked if I would consider finding another route for my farming equipment. Now, if you've got a recorded easement older than the houses complaining about it, there isn't much to consider. I wrote back a short response explaining that the easement existed, it was legally recorded, and I intended to continue using it. Certified mail. Clear and simple. 3 months later, Derek sent another letter. This one had a slightly sharper tone. The board, it said, was reviewing all available options and had hired a land use consultant to examine the easement documentation. That part made me chuckle. Anyone with 20 minutes and access to county records could see the easement was airtight. But it also told me something important. Derek wasn't trying to understand the law. He was trying to find a way around it. So I did the sensible thing and called an attorney I trusted, Darcy Fulton, who's handled agricultural property cases around Murfreesboro longer than I've owned my tractor. She reviewed the easement and leaned back in her chair with a calm little smile. "LeBron," she said, "your position is unassailable," meaning the HOA had exactly 0 legal authority to stop me from using that path. Her advice was simple. Document everything, don't escalate, and let them make the next mistake. For 4 months, nothing happened. Then came that Thursday morning. I walked out, just after sunrise, planning to take the tractor to the back fields. The air was cool, that quiet early-hour stillness before the day really begins. And there they were, 7 massive decorative boulders sitting directly across the entrance of my path. The smallest looked around 300 pounds. The largest probably close to 800. You don't carry stones like that by hand. Somebody had brought equipment. 3 of them still had orange spray paint marks on the sides, the kind landscaping crews used to mark placement positions, which meant whoever did this hadn't just acted on impulse. They had planned it. I stood there a moment, sipping coffee, looking at those rocks. Then I pulled out my phone and took pictures from every angle. Documentation first. After that, I walked back to the equipment barn. My tractor is a John Deere 6155R with a front loader attachment. It's built for moving round hay bales, clearing brush, lifting heavy things, including decorative landscaping rocks. The only question was where those rocks ought to go. I leaned against the tractor, drinking the last of my coffee, thinking about that. And then the answer arrived, so clearly it almost made me laugh. 40 minutes later, every boulder was loaded onto my equipment trailer. I drove about 3/4 of a mile down the county road to the entrance of Ridgecrest Commons, a place designed to impress. Stone pillars, iron gate, manicured landscaping beds. And right there across the driveway, I carefully unloaded all 7 boulders. Same spacing, same alignment, just like they'd arranged them on my path. No car getting through without hitting one. Then I took a few more photos, climbed back onto my tractor, and drove home. There's a special kind of satisfaction when a message explains itself. The phone rang at 6:45 a.m. Derek Solis. He sounded like someone who had been awake for hours, trying to fix a situation that refused to cooperate. "Mr. Mack," he said, "there are boulders blocking the entrance to our community. Residents can't leave. Do you know anything about this?" I told him calmly that the stones at his gate were the same ones someone had placed on my recorded easement the night before. I explained that I had simply relocated them to the property of the people who apparently owned them. Then I gave him Darcy Fulton's phone number. "If you'd like to discuss the easement," I said, "your attorney can call mine." And I hung up. By mid-afternoon, things inside Ridgecrest Commons were getting tense. A resident named Angela Poole called me around noon. She lived near the entrance and had my number from a drainage conversation months earlier. Apparently, there had been an emergency HOA meeting that morning. Residents wanted to know why their neighborhood entrance was blocked and whose brilliant idea it had been to mess with a farmer's access road. Turns out Derek hadn't exactly told the entire community about his landscaping project. And people don't enjoy having their commute extended because their HOA president picked a fight with the wrong neighbor. By late afternoon, the lawyers were talking seriously. The final settlement required 4 things. First, the HOA would formally acknowledge my easement and record that acknowledgement permanently with the county. Second, they would pay for a full professional assessment of the path and repair any damage caused by the obstruction. Third, the board would notify every resident that the easement existed and interference with it would not be tolerated. And fourth, Derek Solis would issue a written apology. That last part took 3 days of negotiation. Not the legal settlement, the apology. Funny thing about pride. Some people would rather fight a losing battle than admit they were wrong. But eventually the letter arrived. Signed. Filed. And more importantly, the HOA's acknowledgement of my easement became part of the permanent county record, meaning that long after Derek's presidency faded into neighborhood gossip, the truth would still sit quietly in the property files. The landscaping company came back later and removed the rocks from the entrance. Same company that placed them in the first place. Derek finished his term and never ran for HOA president again. And the path? It's been clear ever since. The first time I drove my tractor down that lane after everything was settled, it didn't feel dramatic. There were no cheers, no sense of triumph. It just felt normal. A tractor rolling across dirt toward fields that needed tending. And maybe that's the real lesson in all this. People sometimes confuse authority with ownership. They think a title, HOA president, board member, manager, gives them control over things that were never theirs to begin with. But land doesn't care about titles. and neither do recorded rights. In the end, the truth wasn't decided by arguments or opinions. It was written quietly in county records long before Derek ever moved into his house. Sometimes justice arrives in a courtroom. Sometimes it arrives in the bucket of a tractor moving 7 rocks back where they belong. Now I'm curious about something. If someone blocked your property, your access road, or your legal right-of-way, what would you have done? Would you move the obstacle like I did, fight it entirely through lawyers, or just work around it to keep the peace? Tell me in the comments, because situations like that reveal a lot about how people think about fairness, ownership, and the line between authority and arrogance.